get up there. I'll read out the whatever. All right. Let's make a start to this session. So this is the routing security panel. So I'm Kevin Maynell. I'm one of the members of the Apricot Program Committee. So yeah, as the title of the session would suggest, this is a panel on routing security, which continues to be one of the most important areas in network operations. This is in fact a long neglected aspect of network security, although there have been quite a few improvements in the industry over the past few years. But there are still quite a few obstacles for network operators that are slowing down adoption, and this is some of the things that are going to be covered today. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Andrei Robochevsky, who will be moderating the panel and will lead discussions today. He's working for the Global Cyber Alliance, and he's also a member of the NRO as well. He's also working on the Manos Routing Security Initiative. So with that, I will hand over, and Andrei will... What are you doing, Andrei? Well, the presentation first, then Andrei will either introduce a panelist after that or maybe before. But anyway, I'll hand it over to you now.
Sorry about that, but I hope you heard me. What I said before, I don't need to repeat that. Thank you. So we'll structure this session in the following way. We'll start with two presentations, just to set the context and lay the foundation for our discussion at the panel. We'll start with Doug Madury and his presentation on the landscape in routing security. We'll look at the landscape and the trends in routing security from Kentik perspective. Then I will do a presentation on the effort called Manos Plus, discussing how can we make the business case for routing security stronger and therefore stimulate more adoption of routing security technologies and controls. And then I will invite the panelists to the stage, and we will have a good discussion about what challenges, how we address those challenges. They might come up with some recommendations. I would ask you to hold the questions for the presentation till the panel discussion, because they will obviously be discussed in the panel. But in the panel, we structure this in 4 sort of blocks, and please participate. We would like to have this more interactive. Once panelists sort of did their round, if there are any questions or any feedback from your side, or like something would resonate or not, or you have clarifying questions or questions on the substance, please feel free to come up to the microphone and ask those questions. So we didn't decide, frankly, how we going to introduce ourselves. So I guess what I'm going to do, I will introduce Doug first, and I will introduce the panelists when they come to the stage. I think that would be the most logical way. So let me introduce Doug Madry, and Doug is the Director of Internet Analysis at Kentic, where he works for Internet Infrastructure Analysis. The Washington Post dubbed him the man who can see the Internet, for his reputation in identifying significant developments in the structure of the Internet. Doug is regularly quoted by major news outlets about developments ranging from national blockouts to BGP hijacks to the activation of submarine cables. Prior to Kentic, he was the lead analyst for Oracle's Internet Intelligence team, formerly Dyn Research and Renesas. Please welcome me. Please welcome together with me, Doug, to the stage for the presentation. Okay.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I'm Doug. I'm going to do a quick recap on some RPI adoption statistics today. So let's go through, again, just to organize our metrics. We've got step one. There's two steps for ROV to work. We've got step one, where we've got the resource owner creates a ROA. Step two, we've got networks are rejecting invalids. And each one we can measure the rate of adoption separately. So we'll start with the one on the left, the creation of ROAs. So as Andre mentioned in the introduction, these days we have the majority of routes in the V4 routing table have ROAs. This is a milestone that was achieved the 1st of May last year. And V6 actually achieved that the previous fall. So we've been in this space now for a while where most of the routes have got ROAs. What was interesting to me when I came to Kentic back in 2020, it was like, what can we, as a BGP guy, I'd like to know the traffic side of things because it may tell another story. As we all know, there's some routes push a lot of traffic, and there's some routes that handle little to no traffic. So, counting routes might not be the best way to understand the progress that we've made. So I figured, well, why don't we put this in terms of traffic? And so that's where, Kentic has got a unique way to look at these things. One thing that we had developed a number of years ago was upon our ingestion of NetFlow records, we annotate each record with a lot of things. And one of those that was added a while back was the evaluation of the destination IP. What route from the router that generates the NetFlow record, what route was that? Is that, it's like a sound coming off the side here. What was the route that it would have gone to? Is it RPI valid or not? And then that gets saved in the record. And that enables me to then pull up, the stats that we'll see in this presentation. But originally the question was, if a network were to start rejecting invalids, would they lose traffic? That was a concern a number of years ago. I feel like that's kind of settled now. The answer is there's very little of consequence of traffic that you would lose by rejecting invalids. I don't think the question comes up so much anymore, but that's the origin of where this comes from. And we also have some biases in our data sets. So we are a United States company. We have customers all over the world, but we do have, there's the customer makeup and the countries that are represented in our customer base can influence the data. Nonetheless, I think it's still very useful. So what we had started to see when I gave a presentation in February 2022 at a NANOG a while back was looking at like, all right, so at that time, we're about 1/3 of the BGP routes had ROAs. And at that time, when I put that into traffic statistics, we would see over the majority in bits per second of traffic circulating the internet, according to the aggregate NetFlow data that we handle, was going to routes with ROAS. And this turned out to be because of a bunch of eyeball networks that did RPKI deployments and content providers that did RPKI deployments. And while those networks may account for a minority of the BGP routes, they account for a majority of the traffic. That's where most traffic gets, sent and received. So we want to see like, all right, well, how does this change through time? And so I ran this again last year. Again, we've seen growth in ROA creation, so we're going to see a growth in the amount of traffic going to routes with ROAs. Those things would go hand in hand, and that's what we've seen. Now, I've run these numbers recently, and they look kind of similar. So we may have hit a plateau as far as like easy gains, and maybe it's going to slow down because it's been a bit of a straight line for a while. But I ran this recently. We're still not. I've yet to see us cross the 75% threshold. We seem to be just short of that, but that's still quite a bit of traffic going to routes with ROAs, and therefore eligible for the protection that ROV might offer. All right, so then flipping to the step 2 side, the side of rejecting invalids. So there's been that's a harder one to investigate, and there's been a bunch of different techniques people have come up with to try to figure out like which ASs are rejecting invalids. I kind of took a macro view of this to try to get out of some of the gnarliness of trying to guess who's rejecting invalids. And to say, all right, well, from as far as the entire corpus of the entire global routing table, we looked at all the routes. Those that are evaluated as valid or unknown, not found, no ROA, versus the propagation of the routes that are invalid, there's a big difference. And I was already kind of seeing this as just in my day-to-day work with BGP data. But when you plot it out, this is a graph I had made in 2022, where the peaks in these graphs, the x-axis is this is all based on route views data, just taking one big snapshot of the data. The x-axis is the vantage points of how many vantage points see a route, and so you end up with these peaks where you've got some consensus around globally routed. Those are the routes that basically everybody's got, and so those you have these peaks, and then when similar behavior in V4 and V6 doesn't really matter, and then unknown and valid look the same. And then we get down on the bottom where there's invalid, the distribution gets pushed way to the left, and that is the system working where it's suppressing these bad routes, these invalid routes. They don't propagate very far, and that is what we want to happen, because those are the ones that are going to cause disruption. We want them to propagate less. Well, this is 2022. So then we tried last year to look at like how has this changed through time, and are we getting better? And so I had a few different ways. This is just one. I'm kind of giving an abbreviated version of this analysis here, but one way to look at this was in the BGP beacons that a couple different outfits put out. So RIPE NCC publishes a lot of beacons for a lot of different purposes, but they also have beacons that are intentionally invalid and valid, just so you can compare what's happening with those. Job has his own beacons for this purpose that he announces, not to be outdone. And so what we were seeing was similar behavior with all these beacons of, through time. We're looking at the y-axis is how many vantage points see these routes, the same routes through time. And you can see it like those that are valid, the line is kind of augering up. It's not exactly a straight line as the data set kind of changes a little bit, but it's also the route views data sets growing through time. So they would naturally kind of drift upwards. At the same time, the invalids are kind of drifting down as more networks are rejecting invalids. And then we've got things like Zio that last year starting to reject invalids, being having a lot of downstream impact, positive impact on this. And the last comment I would make on the rejection of invalids is, we had this outage at the beginning of last year in Spain. So Orange España suffered a national outage as a result of a hacker discovering these the login credentials to their RIPE NCC login. Password was RIPE admin, and so this person was able to get into their account and start messing with it. And what could they do? Well, they could start publishing ROAs. At the time they had no ROAs, but they start publishing ROAs with incorrect origins, deliberately to try to see what havoc will. Well, it turned out you can cause havoc, and I guess so. They had this multi-hour outage. It's a pretty embarrassing event. Within about a day or so, Riping CC changed it so you had to have two-factor authentication. So lesson learned. The next outage will look different than this. But as a someone who studies like ROV adoption, I'm like, well, you can also look at this. We're like, well, that outage wouldn't have taken place if we don't have networks rejecting invalids. So maybe this is we can take a bit of positive from this outage and say like, well, that's just more validation in case there's any still any debate out there. Let's see. All right, so we are in Southeast Asia. I thought I'd run some numbers for this region. And yeah, so I'm going to show a couple different numbers. One is using the RipeStat tool. If you pull up any country, they'll look, there's a variety of statistics you can pull up for a country. We can look at, one thing they published is the percentage of address space that is geolocated to that country and how much of it is covered with ROAs. And then I can do the same thing from a traffic standpoint. And occasionally these differ, and usually the traffic ends up looking better. And there's an interesting explanation for that. But so with this, we've got two different numbers for each country in this region. And so this is the result where the region has very high ROA coverage. It's actually, there's quite a few regions out there that are doing well. I gave a talk in MENOG a couple months ago in the Middle East. Also, like Oman was like 100%. So I'm like preaching to the choir, talking about ROV in Oman. But this region is doing very well. Malaysia is doing well. But the biggest discrepancy here that's interesting is Brunei going from 29%. So for me to see at this angle, but RipeStat showing a very low percentage. And then when we look at traffic into Brunei from our customers, it's almost entirely going to the incumbent operator who has near universal coverage. So from a traffic standpoint, they look great. From an IP, just counting IPs, they don't look that great. So and there's something similar happening with Indonesia there, where when you look at it from a traffic standpoint, it's actually, we're farther along than if you're just counting unique IPs. So again, I have the benefit of having this data to play with, but I think it's very helpful to look at it and not just get caught up in counting routes or IPs. And then also, expanding to the region in general, there's kind of too many countries for me to go through, but I would just highlight there's quite a few out there that have got exceptionally high ROA coverage. Just calling out a few, we've got like Maldives, Bangladesh, Mongolia, Macau, and even the second tier of like India and Timor-Leste, like we've got very high. I think 70. When you're in the 70%, this is again bits per second from our traffic statistics. These are very high. And then the notable exceptions in this region, we've got China with almost no coverage. North Korea, I'm not sure what to expect out of North Korea. Maybe we just kind of don't worry about expecting a lot of adoption of anything there. But China, I think there's been a lot of improvement in routing hygiene for Chinese operators in the last few years. It'd be great to get them on the bandwagon for ROV and any of the future mechanisms we deploy. And then South Korea is also, I think, an odd one where the percentage that we see there is actually almost entirely from international providers that operate in so like AWS or Alibaba or Cloudflare, who have regions in South Korea that have ROAs that they attained from outside, from Aaron or Apnic or Ripe, and are just using the country. Otherwise, as I understand it, and if anybody knows more, they can come to a mic or talk to me afterwards. But like the process is you've got the KR-NIC that controls the process, and doesn't seem to be too keen on getting it going, but it'd be great to get South Korea, given the advanced and vibrant telecom market there, to get them engaged in this. Right. And then, you know, I throw this in here too. There was an incident just a couple weeks ago. You may or may not be aware of this in Taiwan. So Taiwan is a country that for many years has had, you know, near universal coverage. They've been very strong in the area of ROV deployment, and they suffered an outage. I don't know the details. They haven't really published it and may never will. But nearly all of their, I think all of the ROAs that come through the Taiwan NIC were expired. And so then they basically lost all RPI RV coverage for the country for several hours. And then it came back. Again, someone can come explain if there's more details to share on that. But you know, from a traffic standpoint, this is kind of what it looked like for us. As we can see, I don't know how well this shows up these greens, but like we're going from 100% traffic being valid, shifting over to unknown, and then coming back. But I guess the takeaway here is you can see that in that curve, the overall traffic, there's no outage. You know, there's no. This is a system that was designed to fail safe because in reality, there's just going to be some outages. This isn't the first one that Taiwan's had, but others have had them as well. And so when they occur, basically just lose this protection temporarily, but there, you know, we don't take services down, and that was a design constraint with the system when it was developed. Just run through a couple of, so Job, I often collaborate with analyzing RPI ROV, and this was, I'll just mention a couple of numbers here. He did a end of year analysis here on, you know, what's going on with the database itself. You know, there's been, we've seen a sizable growth in this in 2024. Number of ROAs is up 49%. The size of the databases in megabits is up 31%. We're seeing a, I can't even read this. Oh, the time. Yeah. So the time to download the file and, you know, cryptographically check it, to load it. It's something we have to kind of monitor, because if this gets too big and unwieldy, this is going to have operational impacts. We're not there yet, but it's something that we're going to, you know, probably be keeping an eye on and making sure that we don't have, you know, we try to create as much efficiency as possible so that doesn't become a burden. You know, this lower amount of publication points, there's been a few like hobbyists or networks that have kind of done their own publication, but every time one of those pops up, every validator must query every single one. So if some of these are don't need to be queried, they can be retired. So I've made some progress there that actually makes the system more efficient. And then, yeah, we've got more ASs, more IP address space, not a lot of change in V6. So maybe we've hit a plateau over there as well. We'll see as time will tell, but those are some of the numbers on the database itself. So I'll just wrap up with one last comment here. So as a storyteller in the space, you know, our currency is these anecdotes of outages, and I would say that telling the story of success is difficult, because I don't really know how many things didn't happen on a given day. I would say that for those of us who live in the data, we know that there's routing leaks still taking place. So I've got a relationship with QRadar, and they publish. We collaborate on a lot of these incidents that pop up. There's still routing leaks taking place. They just aren't causing disruption, and that is what we want. Like, we're not going to have no mistakes. Mistakes are going to happen. We just want to have those contained to the areas where they come from, and not mess up everybody else. Well, like I said, there's quite a few leaks that still take place, and y'all don't know about it because you know, it's not just ROV. There's other things, the IRR filtering, like I talked about the talk yesterday. Got peer lock. We've got other mechanisms that are improving our routing hygiene, but yeah, we're not getting, you know, the last debilitating routing leak was maybe 5 years ago, and that's a long time in internet time. But I would mention, you know, we do have these incidents like this one. So in Brazil in September, the government ordered a block of Twitter, now known as X. And this is almost the identical thing that took place in Myanmar in 2021, and then Russia the following year. At least, you know, in those cases between Myanmar and Russia, Twitter created ROAs for nearly all their routes. And then in this case, there was 2 Brazilian providers at least that used BGP to block Twitter within the country. One of those providers leaked these routes, but they mostly just went to the peering base. They didn't make it through the transit providers, and as a result, the disruption was contained within Brazil. It did get picked up on BGP to HE.net. Maybe you can still see this little spike in the graph, but that's what that is showing. This particular Brazilian AS leaking out the Twitter routes, but there was no Twitter outage. And hard to know what's the cause here, but the fact that the routes that would have caused the disruption had ROAs and didn't get leaked. I think I'll chalk this up as a win, but there's a lot of little silent victories that take place nearly every day that it's hard to tell that story, but I have to recognize that these things are taking place. All right, so systems working as designed. We've got over half the routes have got ROAs. Maybe we're knocking on the door of 3/4 of the traffic in bits per second going through routes with ROAs eligible for protection. But we've got other things to do here. So we have to ROV doesn't solve all of our routing issues. We're well aware of path leaks and AS impersonation. So we need to come up with build off the progress that we've had so far and try to address the determined adversary scenario. We need ASPA to handle path leak stuff. So hopefully there's some progress there soon. Anyway, otherwise, remarkable progress. The region's doing really well, and let's keep it going. And that'll do it for my presentation. All right, thank you.
And we'll talk about the success stories and the stuff in our panel discussion as well. So now I would like to make a short presentation on the business case that I mentioned, and about the effort that is focused on building this business case called Manus Plus. Right. So the problem basically in a nutshell here is that we have a vast amount of edge networks. 85% of all networks on the internet are edge networks. And edge networks level of awareness and level of interest in routing security is low. However, in order to implement effective routing security controls, you need participation from those edge networks. That's one aspect. Another aspect, because demand from those edge networks and attention to routing security is not very high, there is a weaker business case. The motivation from your customers doesn't come to connectivity provider. So while there is we'll discuss about the other motivating factors, but kind of this very direct business case when your customer demands higher level of routing security, it doesn't exist. And it weakens the whole sort of, how we can support sustainable way our progress to better routing security. Oops. Okay. So that's what we would like the edge networks, enterprise networks, universities, whatever, especially outside the telecom sector, to be asking, is my connectivity provider the weakest link or my first line of defense? And we would like connectivity providers to answer, yes, we are your first line of defense. And that might create a more robust business case and support routing security. That's the premise. I need to read my slides. Okay, so, well, the routing security problem, or BGP vulnerabilities, were known for 3 decades. Almost very shortly after BGP was designed and introduced, those problems were known. In 2006, there was an RFC published, which outlined all vulnerabilities of BGP. But still, we are dealing with this problem, partly because we don't have or haven't had good technology. And that's why there's so much attention to RPKI and stuff like this. But there were tools in place that allowed a pretty well-controlled way to disallow incorrect routing announcements. What I'm talking about, internet routing registries and filtering. The problem here is that it is a collective problem. The level of interdependency makes every network on the internet either part of the problem or part of the solution. And if you talk about the solution space, the incentive is not very strong. You can, on one hand, you can implement all routing controls and still not be secure, because big deal of your network routing security is in fact in the hands of other network operators. On the other hand, if you don't do anything and all other network operators implement routing security controls, you will not be attacked. You are safe. So that's what's called free riding, right? So while if we sort of, look at, professional benign network operators, while all of the network operators are better off if the routing system is resilient and secure, the individual incentives and individual motivation is not strong enough to move sort of all the networks as a system towards better routing security. This phenomena is known as a collective action problem. It happens in other cases as well, where coordination is too expensive to achieve the desired outcome. One of the ways to address that problem is regulation in sort of, national environments. Such problems, I'm not talking about routing security, but collective action problem in general might be addressed by regulation. That doesn't work in the internet, unfortunately, because, well, we don't have first global regulation, right? And second, because the diversity and different scenarios are so broad that one size cannot fit all. Another approach that was introduced 10 years ago is to stimulate collective action through building norms and making certain operations a norm that can be reinforced by peer pressure. 10 years ago, an effort was launched, which is called Mutually Agreed Norms for Routing Security Manners. And it's based on two main pillars. One is commonly agreed undisputed baseline. So something that every network can and should and probably even must do to implement routing security. And the second, support for those norms demonstrated by a growing community of networks that can demonstrate their commitment to those requirements. So those are two pillars of manners. I'm telling you this because manners forms the basis of the effort that I'm going to talk about. So what is the business case of manners, and how manners articulates the business case for its participants? Well, first of all, if you implement better routing controls, you make your network operations more secure. There is a business case. You don't want your customers to become your transit providers all of a sudden, right? These route leaks that Doug referred to, they are pretty devastating. If your customer becomes your transit provider, leaks routes to the whole internet, and you believe them, then there is a big outage, not only for the customer, but probably for you as well. So you want to implement this filtering control, and you don't want your customer to be in control of your own routing. Well, improving routing, and that's the collective part. Every improvement contributes to the overall security of the routing system. Again, I'm referring to Doug's graphs of, ROV, while not being implemented globally by every network, it still shifts the propagation of the invalid routes to the left, right? And that's a good thing. And secondly, participating in manners might create competitive advantage. You may be seen as a better choice for your customers when they do this choice. Now, that last thing, because we were talking about the core, the big internet, this kind of network operator relationships, that hasn't worked very well, I think, in manners. So if you look at this big internet and if you look at the enterprises, they would say, oh, how by selecting a good connectivity provider can I sort of guarantee security in all this big internet? Well, the real situation is not as bad. So if you looked at the enterprise internet, it's a much smaller internet. And for enterprise, what is the most important is to secure paths to their digital assets that are increasingly stored outside the enterprise perimeter. Access to the data center, access to their cloud services, access to their business-to-business relationships. And if you look at this, there may be one or two intermediaries that can implement that routing security. We did some research, and this was not a full research, but this is just to demonstrate that this point has some proof. We looked at a slice of financial sector in Australia and looked where possibly what kind of possible cloud services they might access. So on the left side, you see some of the financial institutions, and on the right side, you can see some of the cloud providers or hosting providers that they might want to reach. And as you can see here, well, apart from sort of DDoS mitigation services, you can see just one intermediary between them and their digital asset. Now, the color scheme, if you're wondering, it's about menace readiness. It's about how conformant those providers with menace requirements. And we have this color scheme, which is ready, blue, yellow is aspiring, and red is lagging. So for an enterprise, in fact, they should be looking that this intermediary that they select is blue color as much as possible, right? And what that will guarantee, that will provide some level of assurance that their path between them and their digital asset is more or less secure. We also looked at another scenario when enterprise and their partner, right, business partner, exchange data. And here we looked at the slice of automotive industry. On the left, you see some of the auto manufacturers. And on the right, you can see the global suppliers. And again, you can see, well, the path is a bit longer between two of them, maybe two intermediaries on average. But so that means if enterprise and their partner select a good provider, the path can be also secured. Again, both of them should be looking for a blue path rather than the red path. Right, so what is for the enterprise? I mean, how can we bring this 85% into this discussion of routing security? How can we motivate them to implement their part of the puzzle, right? Because without them implementing this side, for the connectivity provider, for their first line of defense, it's very difficult to implement effective routing controls. Well, of course, they should implement their own practices, right? And that is part of the game, right? They should implement their part of the accuracy. But another thing, and that is desirable, they should demand better routing controls from their connectivity provider, sort of providing this pressure on their connectivity provider and building this business case. So from what I just showed you, and from enterprise perspective, routing security becomes not just routing security, which is something that they might not be interested, which is something happening outside, something that maybe connectivity providers should take care of, but it really a supply chain security for the enterprises. So what has been developed by the Menace Plus working group, and that was a group of individuals and organizations that put effort into developing this high level of requirements that enterprises should expect from their connectivity provider to achieve high level of assurance that their path to their digital content is secure. And that's what we call a metrics, control metrics, routing control metrics. It is based on Menace baseline, for those who know Menace. but it's much more extensive. It also has higher requirements, but also has audit requirements, because what we try to do, that we are not introducing a requirement that cannot be audited. Because the idea is that Manus can produce a high level of assurance that whoever is Manus Plus compliant really implemented those controls. So we have 7 controls on routing security, and that goes into more detail how you implement RPKI, how you implement IRR technologies, how you do IRR filtering, how you do ROV, how you how you protect your BGP sessions and protect your devices. It has broader set of requirements going outside routing security, but which is within the interest of enterprises, such as capabilities for detecting unwanted traffic and providing some DDoS mitigation. It also mentions things like security services, because in many cases, enterprises under-resourced as far as network management is concerned. So connectivity provider can provide those services to ensure their better, security posture. So this is a collective effort, like every effort that is done in Manus. This is a working group that is done by mailing list and Zoom. We meet monthly, and while we met monthly while working on this metrics, the group is still continues its work. I'll talk about future steps. And if you're interested, please send the mail to contact@manus.org. Be happy to include you in this work. Control metrics is ready. And also we launched a self-assessment survey. So for connectivity providers that might be interested in joining this effort, they might be interested to filling out this survey. Now, this survey, this information will not be public. It is really for the working group and for us as Secretariat to assess the appetite and feasibility of the requirements that are put there. So really the survey is about whether you comply with those requirements and whether you can demonstrate that those requirements are implemented and how you can demonstrate this. This is the survey. Well, another objective is to see how clearly the requirements are expressed in the control metrics, because it's basically a mirror of the control metrics. So I would encourage you, if you're interested, to go to this link, and I think the slides will be published, and fill out the survey. There is no commitment, and the results will not be published, maybe in sort of, anonymized statistical form once we complete the survey. But it would be very helpful for the working group to know how network operators look at this set of requirements. Some of the aspects of the future work. So one of the things that we discussed yesterday, there was a measurement session, is that there is a caveat in measuring conformance to filtering from the outside by using passive measurements when you look if a network was implicated in an incident. The problem there that you're measuring non-conformance, that's one thing, right? Another thing, that systems that report those incidents, they have both false positives and false negatives. That means that you can miss an incident that the network was implicated, or you may accuse a network that wasn't implicated in an incident that the incident happened. For this, you probably need to go, if you want to achieve a higher level of assurance, you need to go to a more active measurements. And again, Doug, you mentioned beacons, right? That helpful just to look at the overall internet and overall sort of average ROV capability or IRR capability. You can do the same. But here what we're thinking of is with interested parties to establish peering sessions and use the same sort of way of injecting correct or sort of announcing a prefix that will be changing status in the IRR and RPKI to invalid to valid, and see how the network process those requirements using their customer provider policy. It's also very important to, and that's the survey should give us more information if there is a group of network operators that are really interested. So then we can really launch that program and create Manus Plus with the first group of sort of founding participants, as we did with all other programs in Manus. And for that, we're launching a survey. Right. And yeah, I mentioned the last part of this was that we also looking, what I mentioned to you is that level of awareness is very low at enterprise level. So once Manus is a sort of standard, and once we have connectivity providers supporting that standard, we will look how to inject references to Manus Plus from common InfoSec frameworks, right? So then a CISO at enterprise can look and see this kind of checklist. Oh, routing security should be there. And for enterprises, it's more likely that routing security can be, packaged in the supply chain security aspect. So that would be a more normal way of looking at those things for an enterprise security organization and see, okay, I need to achieve higher level of supply chain security here, and therefore I have to implement those controls, and therefore I have to require those things from my connectivity provider. So that's the idea. Well, thank you. And with that, I would like to invite esteemed panelists to the stage where we can continue discussion, and I will also have an opportunity to introduce them finally. Please. Doug, don't be shy. So I introduced Doug already. Let me introduce other panelists. So Muzamil Mohammed Azalan. Muzamil has been with Telecom Malaysia for the past 14 years and has been in the industry for about 15 years. His focus is with the core backbone and edge, covering diverse portions, which include operation, deployment, strategies, and security for Telecom Malaysia. Thank you. Anirban Datta. Anirban is a seasoned network engineer with over 15 years of experience in designing and managing large-scale IP networks, currently serving as the head of core network at Earth Telecom, specializes in routing, switching, and network automation. Anirban was also a Manus ambassador in 2020 and has contributed to the networking community through technical publications and training initiatives. He is passionate about internet infrastructure security and capacity building, constantly exploring innovations in the field. And last but not least, Mark Duffy. Mark has worked as a senior network engineer for Telstra's transport and IP core engineering since 2016. He has over 10 years of internet service provider experience and is also an active member of the AUSNOG program committee. Please welcome the panelists, and we'll begin with our panel. So let me ask you first, and this is primarily to the network operators, ask the question, more general question. So all of you, I think, implemented strong security controls and looking at strong security push in your network as far as routing security is concerned. What were the main challenges and what are the main challenges they're facing now as far as routing security concerned? Yeah, Muzamil, maybe we can start with you.
All right, I'll take the first question. So in our cases, I think one of the major challenges was managing multiple vendors. And for example, right, when we have some issue and we wanted to push something new in the network, so with multiple vendors, meaning that we have to test everything on all of the vendors. And upon completing that, so we have to produce 4 different types of documents, each for the vendors. And then when we wanted to deploy that in the network, so we go staggered, which is, for example, when we wanted to deploy with the vendor A, we pick 5 routers and push it into the network, and we'll monitor for like 2 weeks, because it does save us one time, because at that time, those 5 routers that we push trigger some problem with our route reflector. And luckily for us, only 5 are pushing something wrong. If like we were to push in 20 at the same time, well, I bet the route reflector will goes down. So those are, I would say, part of the challenges that we saw from my side. So I think.
Thank you. From my point of view, I am facing a couple of challenges in my network as I am from Bangladesh. So what I have seen for the last couple of years that yes, Doug shared with us, there's a RPKI validation. These things are getting much good, but still we are facing lots of routing security issues, right? So why this is going on? So what I have seen that number one, educating our customers or the clients. They are connecting with us, but they don't know what they need to do inside their networks, what they have to accept from their upstreams and what they have to advertise towards other upstreams, because nowadays all the clients are multi-homing, right? So this is one. And second one is, as Muzammil also told, that we have some dependencies with the vendors, because in my network, I still cannot implement the ROV, because there are lots of dependencies like OS dependencies, the hardware capabilities, all these stuffs are going on. So we are working on that. So how we can do, we have to build a common platform for all the vendors so that we can implement all these ROV factors and all.
I think one of the challenges for us, we've had RPKI, ROAs and ROVs since I think 2020 now. COVID makes this all a blur. It's been fairly seamless for us, to be honest. We went through initial software regression testing for the RTR server connections. We hit some bugs early on, but they were fixed fairly quickly through the vendors. We also have multi-vendor, but only a couple. But what we probably encounter the most is an education piece, going back to the customers, having them understand that routing security is a thing. They can go click a button in the MyACNIC portal and have an ROA created and effectively get free security around the global internet for anyone that's implementing ROV for their prefix. They just sometimes don't care. And encouraging them to care and that it's a real thing and that it will help them and benefit them is a really hard conversation. I think I was saying to the guys earlier, I have been having a periodic conversation with the customer now for the past 3 or 4 months. I give them a call every now and then, and I say, you actually don't have a route object or an ROA object. You really need to create this because someone in Norway reached out to us and they can't get to your network. Their answer is, well, why does someone in Norway want to get to my network? I'm in Australia. So it's a bit of an education piece that I think we need to work on a lot with the customers for us. That's the biggest challenge. Yeah.
So it's interesting what you mentioned, customers, and we had a similar discussion in North America last autumn. And one of the challenges, besides sort of what you mentioned on education and interest, the customer sort of side in route understanding why they need to do the action and benefits. There was another thing that there also were challenges in actually securing the space. The IP space becomes more mobile in the sense that it's being leased, it's being transferred. Some of the address space is being controlled as far as, for instance, RPKI is concerned by party, which is not the party that announces this. For instance, when leasing, it's not always being sort of this control being thought through and transferred. Some of the space in some parts of the world still cannot get full RPKI service for various reasons. Do you experience the similar thing, or is it mostly down to just, I don't see the reason why to do that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, for our own ROA implementation, we have quite contiguous subnets. So everything is mostly supernetted to the rest of the world. So for ourselves, our own IP space is our own, and we have enough of it at the moment, so we don't need to get into leasing or anything like that. And then again, for the customers, predominantly we're in Australia as AS1221. So it's all through APNIC. It's not really leased. We don't see much of that at the moment.
Yeah, it's true that lots of resources or IP address spaces are moving nowadays. Like as we know, IPv4 is almost at the end stage. So people are now reusing their, maybe one person have 2/24, maybe he is leasing 1/24 to other guys, but not creating the proper RPKI or ROV from the AS, which will be originated this specific prefix. So this is one of the challenge for us when we accepting the prefix, that we found that yes, he is not the actual owner. So this is one thing. So similarly, that same thing goes on, that educating the clients. So I should say in our subcontinent, the main thing is that network is now running by the owners, not the network engineers. Because the business owner, he is thinking that I'm taking the traffic and transferring to my clients, my business is going on. Why do I care about the routing security? It's none of my business, something like that. This is the attitude for them. But we, the network engineers, we are the responsible guys, right? We have the highest responsibility to check out these resources, what we need to focus. We need to build a secured infrastructure. So in that type, from that space, we can say that we need to focus more to educating the small ISPs or the client switcher, because as Andre also shared with us, that 85% of the traffic is coming from the edge networks. So these small guys are very much responsible for this. So we are the transit providers or the gateway operators. We are or the head of the these small guys. So if we can stop that irrelevant routes towards the global routing table, it can stop a certain level of traffic or the issues. But these guys, the small guys, are not only connected with us, they are multi-homes, they are connecting with different operators over there. So all of them have to specify the security measures. Another one, I should say that I have found that most of the operators, they are turning up the BGP in the same router with IX, also with the transit. So this creates a major, huge problem with route leaks, because in the IX, there are lots of providers are over there who are connected. So there are lots of bilateral pairing, BPL or MPL over there, and also the transit. So they didn't care about what they are accepting from the IXS and advertising towards that transit. So this creates another vulnerability. So I should suggest that at least you should take the IX pair and the transit pairs into two different boxes at least, so that you can measure that what I need to accept and what I need to advertise towards others, right? So.
Okay, sorry. To add, I think today, based due to the leasing and everything, so we started to see cases where customers are complaining to us, like why like my traffic been dropped, why I can't travel far. So upon checking, it's due to the invalid routes. And when we check further, they were saying like they are leasing and those leasing and those propagation, the ROA were not being updated. So this is why some will never be able to go out and some like stuck somewhere, because today, I think most of the top tier, they are dropping the invalids today, right? So if it will be dropped somewhere, but we can't do much because ROA itself is being controlled by the account maintainer. Only they have the authority to update. So the best that we can do is just like to advise them, like this is you have to communicate with the person, with the one that you do the leasing and everything. Well, sometimes they listen, sometimes like more approach, more help we should require from our side, but being like in between. So it's in a way like to say our responsibility to communicate and to advise them what they are supposed to do. Well, that's about it.
When you were talking, one analogy came to my mind, and maybe that's a wrong analogy, but it's like, driving without sort of, driving lessons and license. And of course, you will damage yourself big time if you get into incident, but you create incidents for others and for general traffic. And it seems like some of the small guys that really their focus is business, not connectivity. Right, they do not understand. They set up, they fired out the router, and maybe someone came and helped them, and that's it, right? And it sits there, and there is little control. Any sort of suggestions how you think you can? Is there some common approach that could be used here? Or you are all on your own, having own conversations, not having common reference. Would that be useful, maybe?
Perhaps I would say that with those new leasing, right? Perhaps there's like a new process we should dictate that, well, if you wanted to do this, you must make sure that the role is there, the propagation is valid. And in our case as well, right? Today, for service we rely on LOA just to accept the prefix. Our node will check first whether that prefix is valid or not. If it's invalid, we will not insert that into our router. And then coming back to the routes that have been dropped, right? Certain vendors have the capability to whitelist their routes, but it will not solve the problem. So that's why we didn't go to the option.
Yeah, so mainly two things here. First, if we talk about the IP address space, RPKI or ROV is not the only solution for the routing security. It might take down the vulnerabilities, but this is not the only solution. There are lots of things we need to talk about or we need to care about, right? So if I'm talking about the practical example, like few days back, one of my customer, he is taking the full routes from my network and advertising to other upstream. So it creates a route leak. So the customer onboarded at the midnight. So my NOC guys were not that on time. The implementation or integration in department was on that time was closed. So we didn't know that what happened. So at the very beginning of the next day, we found that this customer is onboarded, but didn't get a single Mbps of traffic. What happened on that time? And BGPHE.net, very renowned portal in this subcontinent, and found that this guy is our upstream. Interestingly. So then I dig down to this, what happened? Definitely there is a route leak going on. Otherwise, my downstream cannot be my upstream, right? So what I found that, yes, another operator, he implemented all the routing securities perfectly, all the AS path filter or prefix filter to his upstreams, but one of the IX was missed. So through that IX, these prefixes was advertising to us that. So the BGP definitely the data came to them and found out that, yes, so your customer is now your upstream. So I have to talk with them verbally that this is the problem you are creating. So you have to create this AS path filter or the prefix filter and this. So this is currently practically, this is the only way right now going on here, that manually we or verbally we need to educate individual clients that what you need to do and what you have to do for the receiving and advertising the routes.
I think when we started our RPKI journey, at the time, we reached out to a number of other large Australian networks to try and collaborate and essentially do the right thing by the internet. So we were able to have, discussions with other networks like Vocus 4826, share our learnings as we had gone through to try and get that adoption in Australia between the large networks kind of sorted. And that way, I guess, going back to your point before about, the layers of validation, if you've got validation occurring on most of your tier ones or your transit providers now, there's kind of not really a requirement to do ROV on the, a stub network. So that really helps. And we, I guess, tried to do that engagement through the community. So through our local NOGs as well, to try and build that view that this is something we should all be doing. And if there was information we could share as a provider that had gone through it, happy to share and get everyone on the right page. I think one of the other challenges that you're talking about with the customer side of things, there's a balance as well, probably with the way you communicate to a customer. I think if I had a sales or a products person in here, they probably are not super keen on sending 10 emails to a customer, right? Because it's creating more touch points, telling them that they need to go and register an object. But maybe that's something we could think about and work with from, you know, a product sales side of things, that when we do sign up a customer, to your point, they have to have an AS set, or they have to have their routes signed before we onboard them into the system. And that way you kind of getting it done at the start. There's probably an angle there of, well, how do you then maintain and order that going forward? But that's another discussion. But I think that would probably be a really good way to help before signing them up and putting them on the product, that they've already done the right thing, because it's a requirement of the product that you're selling them. But obviously that brings its own challenges, because if you have a cheap other network that doesn't do the same thing and they can just sign up and it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Chicken and egg.
Doug, yeah, I think you wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, on that point, I think we're starting to coalesce around some norms in this space, like for the cloud providers. If you're going to BYO IP address space to a cloud provider, it's common now that you have to have a ROA, and that for them kind of solves a couple things. There's the routing security thing, but also that helps them just check like you actually own this stuff, because they've got a lot of fly-by-night operations trying to have them announce address space. That doesn't exactly solve that problem, but that if we have you know, AWS and Google and big players like that requiring ROAs, then it may just, you know, we may end up with some new norms of just like, if you're going to go to have get a transit provider to transit your networks, they need to have ROAs, because this is how things are done now, and that would be great if we can get there. Maybe we're on our way. You know, I've given a lot of talks along the lines of the one I gave earlier, and I often in the end have people come up and ask a couple of questions. One's around IP leasing. It's come up a couple times. I'll have someone come up and be like, I've leased some address space, I can't get a ROA created. I only deal with the broker, I don't deal with the actual resource owner. And like somebody mentioned a case where the route is invalid, I mean, I think we have to kind of get to the point where, like, to explain, you bought a broken good, you know, essentially, and so I don't know, maybe there's some norms around the leasing
A
stuff.
checklist.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe there's a manners checklist. I don't know if you want to delve into that cesspool, but and then the other case that comes up a lot is around DDoS mitigation, and people needed to either inject more specifics over peering links that are more specific than what a ROA has got. And so then that means for a network to accept this from a DDoS mitigation provider, they have to turn off route origin validation for certain parts of the network to make this thing work. And so again, I think on a couple of these, there's not, it'd be good for us as a community to have like some norms ironed out. Maybe manners can play a role in codifying that, or just gathering up what are the people's experiences. And because I feel like, you know, given it a long enough timeline, maybe we'll get there. But if we can short circuit that and get that, figure out what the answers are, that would be helpful.
Sure. Make a suggestion. I think, yeah, Manners is a community effort.
I'll write an email to
Yes.
Manners, see if anybody answers.
Well, thank you. Let me move on to maybe a different sections. And by the way, if, as I said, if there are questions, please raise your hand. And if you want to comment or sort of share your experience in this area working with customers, please feel free to come to the microphone. Really be appreciated. We have a mobile microphone.
Yeah, and if just state your name and affiliation.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Azri. I'm from Malaysia, now working as one of the SI in Malaysia. was previously from customer and I think the title of routing engineer is pretty undervalued, I think, in the industry. So just in sharing my experience, now when I'm on the vendor side, I'm seeing something like requirement from customer, but I see that there's a gap, a big gap in terms of the skill set in understanding and deploying. So like me, a vendor, I'm a pro Juniper. So when I propose an RPKI solution based on all this global documentation publicly shared, there's a preference to produce the solution in customer multi-vendor environment. So I can propose Juniper, but I can't govern how they want to deploy on Cisco or other vendors Huawei. So I think what would be, moving forward, if let's say, I think there's a lot of gap actually. Not all telcos, ISP, has this skill set for talent, but we in another angle, how we want to, spread this out or build up the skill set. Maybe that's my question. Thank you.
Anyone wants to respond?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. Yes, you cannot govern someone that you should go with a single vendor or something. Definitely, it won't be a good solution. But nowadays, what's going on? The traffic is booming. No? From the COVID time, the traffic is exponentially growing, and huge traffic is coming on after the 2020. So nowadays, the operators are changing their hardware, only focusing on the port density. That yes, my traffic is booming, so I need a bigger router with bigger ports and all, or bigger switches. This is not the only way, because you have a very large amount of ports in your router or the switches is not the solution for it in terms of routing security. Because when you need to apply the RPKI or ROV and all these stuffs, you have to be in the parallel with the version, the capability of that hardware, all these stuffs. So I should suggest when you change your router or migrate your network devices, you need to think about the port density plus these security measurements which are capable for your new devices or router or switch.
And just maybe if I understood that correctly, going back to your presentation, Andre, maybe if it's vendor agnostic, right? So they're talking about Cisco or Juniper or whatever other name. This maybe comes back to their choices of transit providers if they are an enterprise network. So if they are coming and purchasing transit, maybe they should be asking the question of what that transit provider is doing for them. Are they already performing ROV? Because to my point before, if it is a stub network, they actually don't need to do much, right? They can do the ROA for the IP resource, which is, not connected to what platform or vendor they're running. And then the ROV part, which they would need to run on the platform, they actually wouldn't need to do, right? That would be being taken care of by their transit provider. So maybe that's a more platform agnostic way of approaching it, rather than going through that effort of, setting up an RTR connection and ROV and etc.
I would like, just in interest of time, we don't have much time. Let's move on because I have another, I think, very interesting question. So I think recently, at least, a lot of focus was on RPKI, and for a reason, right? It's a technological way, a standard way of mitigating this problem. But RPKI is not a silver bullet, and I think for someone it might appear, oh yeah, just need to deploy RPKI. In many discussions like RPKI, and sometimes people forget that this is just only part of the solution. And not only because RPKI deployment is not 100%, right? You still need to fall back to other methods of controlling the announcements, but also because I think routing security, as far as filtering is concerned, is just one piece of the puzzle, right? Think about, down to the very low level of securing your BGP sessions, ensuring that your BGP ports are not open to the world, for instance, or also maybe taking more holistic approach, like to this Orange example, right? Wow, your weakest link was your account to the LIR portal, which is kind of, okay, that's pretty far away from a router, right? So what's your what is in your toolkit? How you sort of see it expanding, how you see it building, maybe also looking a bit in the future, what are you planning to add to this toolkit?
Okay. For us, RPKI is not like the full stop solution for us. To us, it's just a value added, and we never neglect all the basic security filter that we have in our network. Properly configure our import policy, export policy, ASPA filter, prefix list, and drop the margin. And coming back, when we talk about security, right? It's not a one-time execution. This is where, like, for us, we learn, we look how others are doing it, what is the current incident. And then today, I think it's much more easier for us to grab those information, update from Kentit. And sometimes when you need to ask, I think just ask, and I even like ask Doug, I think in the weekend, I just try like somebody from at the far end of the globe, and he reply over the weekend. So to us, it's a ongoing effort, and we learn, we improve, and who knows, like ASPA is like there's a work group into it, and we are curious how it will help us in the future.
If we talk about some tools and techniques or suggestions for us for the BGP sessions, security and routing security, yeah, we all agree now that RPK have done its own job till now, but there are lots of things we need to do, right? So mainly the main protocol right now for our global table is the BGP. So there are lots of things going on in the BGP sessions because it's the main negative side or the main weakness of BGP is the trust. So whatever I'm advertising it towards it accepts. So when we turn up the session, BGP session with any peers or customers or upstreams, first we can add some values here like BGP MD5. You can use GTTL in your network. Also, we can use TCP/AO and manners. Definitely, the 4 pillars of manners like the routing rigs, the route leaks, prefix hijacking, all these stuffs, anti-spoofing. So I should say BCP 194. Yeah, this should be implemented in your network for anti-spoofing measurements. So this is not, I should say, the routing security solution is not the thing that I am doing these 4 or 5 steps and it stops all the vulnerabilities. It's not like that. It's a work in progress that Andre already shared with us. So we need to move on with every day to improve the routing security. We need to give new tools with it. Also, the next, if we are talking about what will go in the future, like AS path validation. So I don't know that this is who are advertising towards me that routes is the validated routes because or one in the middle of the AS path, I don't know whether it is the valid route or not. So the AS path validation is also another point I should say for the next couple of years, I should say. So this is the thing we need to work on it.
Yeah, fairly similar. I think we're all following the same playbook, so that's really good. We have it's always several tiers, right? So there is no one-stop solution. To your point, there's no silver bullet. RPKI is just a one step of validation that we do for adding routes into the network. Depending on the products, we have WHOIS validation, which is a manual approval that goes through for some products. in terms of, you know, security, max prefix, obviously, I think we have all seen route leaks around the world that have been caused by max prefix issues. You know, very recent for us in Australia, there was a very large outage that came back to a max prefix issue. So there's ways to, you know, manipulate that. Max prefix used to be a hard teardown option. There is now a discard option, so it stays up and just stops accepting new routes. So you can set that up, I guess, you know, differently depending on your infrastructure links versus your customer links and things like that. But otherwise, yeah, certainly ASPA, something we want to work towards with our vendors. And TCP/AO, we're starting to do on our infrastructure links with, you know, intention on doing that on customer links in the future. But for now, that's an MD5 solution that it's not very good.
All right, I'm looking at the clock and I think, well, time flies. I mean, we spent almost 90 minutes actually talking. Hard to imagine. I wanted to wrap up with coming back to Doug's presentation, where he showed our success as an industry. I think we are doing quite well. But at the same time, we discussed in the hallway, we can be a victim of our own success. And in part that, I mean, the level of, you know, awareness or excitement about RPKI deployment and about all these incidents that create sort of, you know, publicity and media attention and other attention may go down as there are less incidents. So, Doug, maybe you can start sort of, you know, share some thoughts. I mean, how can we not become a victim of our own success?
Yeah, it's
without creating incidents, okay?
Okay, all right. Well then, I'm out. I suspect, you know, in recent years, I think this topic has evolved into these attacks on cryptocurrency that they're not big routing leak kind of things. These are more targeted and clever things. And I think probably the big stories in the future are going to be those that involve like targeted determined adversary things where they're taking advantage of these weaknesses we have yet to address in routing security. But as far as like the big leaks era, you know, maybe knock on wood, maybe that's over. And it is something on my mind of like it's going to require some discipline in this community to try to keep moving forward. If I think to a lot of people, ROV, like if we can do that, you know, what else can we do? Can we do ASPA? Can we do these other techniques? If we can deploy them to a similar degree of success, then we'd be in good shape. But nothing's guaranteed here. So yeah, it's something on my mind of just trying to figure out how to keep the momentum going. Yeah, the big stories aren't going to be the leaks maybe anymore, and they're going to be these hacks that are really hard to find. You know, like we know of certain ones due to some exceptional threat analysts that have uncovered stuff. I'm guessing there's quite a few that take place that we don't know about yet. Maybe we never will. But there'll probably be some hacks.
So what you're saying, there are less of fat fingers and more of a targeted, you know, orchestrated attack.
Yeah, I mean,
using routing vulnerabilities.
I think in this space, I look at it as a spectrum here. So on one end, you've got the bonehead errors, and we've done a good, like when I entered this industry in 2009, there's plenty of bonehead errors happening on a regular basis. Now they may still happen, but they take out less of the internet, and so that's progress. But the other end of that spectrum of the determined adversary, we've hardly scratched at that problem yet, and working on that is going to be. It's going to be hard. Those are harder problems, and you know, if we lose any momentum, that'll make it harder too. So there'll be things to do on this topic, you know, as long as the internet is around.
Yeah, and when we discussed the customer sort of demand and awareness, I didn't hear from you that media attention was sort of, you know, they would be jumping up and down and saying, "Ooh, route leaks. I mean, what are you doing to protect me from route leaks or from route hijacks?" So is it true? I mean, do you see this sort of less interest maybe as a less motivating factor to do and work with your customers and implement those controls? or this is independent?
I'm not sure how I got the microphone. Sorry, what specifically is the question?
Well, the question is sort of we are doing better and less incident happen on the internet, and has media attention and well, maybe regulator attention even helped you in the past? And if it did, then what can consequences
Yeah,
be?
I mean, yeah. I mean, certainly the government having a vested interest certainly helps us as engineers, I guess, get things implemented and done. But I guess, you know, going back to that point, when it is done, what keeps up that momentum? And yeah, it's a pretty hard question. I think to your point, things keep evolving, so I don't think things go away. I don't think, you know, network incidents and security incidents are suddenly going to stop. They're just going to evolve and be something else. And I think that will actually carry it going forward. But yeah, I think from talking to people in the hallways here, between engineers, there's always kind of a joke that, you know, you need an incident to happen to get the funding for the project that you want to do and things like that. And it's maybe an unfortunate reality of, again, you know, some of the presentations we've had here about how we represent ourselves as network engineers to our management, that we probably need to do a better job on, because when it all just works, no one cares, right? And we do seem to be doing a pretty good job at it for the most part, unless you're running a MikroTik.
If you feel yourself in the shoes of security officer, right? It's the same thing.
So yeah, so I, you know, maybe working into that InfoSec side of things and having some sort of structure where people do see it, it's more visible to them, that it becomes an ongoing consideration instead of something that is now just working and we're happy and wait until the next event.
Okay, thank you. I think we're out of time. We have to finish. If there are any sort of closing remarks from your side or questions from the audience, I think we can take one question or one closing remark. Yeah, there is a question over there.
All right. So thank you all for your wonderful point and discussion. And actually, I have 2 points, and to save time, I will just discuss it briefly. And the first question is about RPKI, and just like you guys just mentioned, and so there's some customers that which is not educated well, or clients that they, you know, manage the RPKI system very poorly. And actually, I'm leading a research project in China of RPKI, and we found that there's, you know, there are very problems and issues of RPKI itself. For example, we have no way to audit all the authorities, including the IRs, or the intermediate authorities. We have no way to replace them in the case of the misbehavior, and we have no way to properly manage the data quality of RPKI. Actually, we are running a monitor system of the global repository of RPKI data, and we found that there are numerous data quality issues of RPKI data objects. For example, the conflicts in all those ROAs or resource certificates. And I can say that the number is much larger than everyone can imagine. So it can be many reasons to cause these issues. For example, just like you mentioned, the fat finger errors, the misconfigurations, and the misbehavior of the authorities, no matter intentional or unintentional. So I'd like to ask: is there any suggestions from you guys to, to push the community that we can put up with some methods to audit to make the RPKI data quality better, and to enhance the resilience and the trustworthiness of the RPKI system? Thank you.
Do you have all this analysis written up somewhere? Is this something people can read or look at? The analysis you're describing? This has been Is this
okay.
Published somewhere or?
Yes, I have I will have a presentation
Okay, great.
after this session. So
Okay.
maybe you can join us.
I will come to you. Yeah, so I think, listen, there's no perfect system out there. So I think I'm not one of them, but I think the designers of the system would welcome this feedback and make sure they've addressed these issues. You know, some of these, I don't know that we can't replace RIRs, but yeah, I'm glad you're poking at it. We need people to test this system. So if you've found some issues, that's awesome. And I don't know, we can make sure it gets to the right people. And we'll start off by attending your session and your talk.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm happy to discuss with you.
Terrific. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. And thank you, the panelists, for this informative session. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed that.
Yeah. Oh, we gotta. Yeah, Andre. Oh, okay.